Yeah.
All right. Hello and good evening, everybody. My name is Julia, and I am the director of Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light. We're going to let a few more people into the session and get started in about 1 minute. But in the meantime, if you would write in the chat who you are and where you're coming from. Hello, Erin and Susan and Paula and Maisie. Beth, it's great to be with you again here in this space. Beth
Hey,
is
everyone.
Hey, Beth is from Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, and she runs the Resilience Hubs and the Resilience Hub Network down there. Hello, Brett. Good evening. Nice to see you again, Nikolai. It's been a long day. Nikolai and I were just together with Joshua and maybe 50 other people in a tabletop heat event tabletop exercise in Ramsey County, which we'll talk about a little bit at the end of the session. Hello, Kelly and Chad and Anne, Richard. Richard and Anne get the award for the earliest, most on-time people in our group here. So let us know who you are, and if you're coming from a specific community where you're dreaming about having a resilience hub, write that in the chat. Erin, I'm so excited to meet with you offline here sometime to talk more about the Clearwater Forest Camp. All right.
That sounds awesome.
Totally. Got to have some serious resilience hubs out in those areas. All right, well, I think that we will get started. And first, I just want to welcome you here tonight. We'll be on between 6:30 and 8, as we are every third Tuesday of the month. So this is session 3 of our Community Climate Resilience Network. And tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about risk and asset mapping. And we're going to hear from my recently discovered colleague and wonderful Resilience Hub expert, Susan Silber, who's come to us from Northern California. And so she's going to spend some time in the middle of our presentation talking about her work and how she has been able to build not only hubs, but also really exciting and vibrant networks. So I will hand it to Joshua here, who's going to read our land and trauma acknowledgement. Joshua.
Hi, everyone. Welcome in. I'd like us all to take a second, take a breath, and be present here together. So take time out to coordinate and plan and think about how we can protect our communities, our loved ones, and plan for the future. Wherever you may be, let us acknowledge that we are all on Indigenous land. Minnesota is located on the traditional and contemporary homelands of the Anishinaabe and Dakota peoples, the original stewards of this territory. We are committed to uplifting the name of these lands and the community members from these nations as we pursue a right path together. We acknowledge the trauma that is deeply embedded in the foundation of this country. The land we reside on came under control of the United States of America through genocide, slavery, and ongoing occupation. We recognize the deep historical, spiritual, and personal trauma that has impacted Indigenous communities, communities of color, and immigrant communities. By offering this acknowledgement of trauma, we affirm the right of people to bring their whole selves and stories into this space, and we affirm our intention to promote healing, respect, and love. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joshua. All right, so here's what we've got in store tonight. Um, we're gonna talk a little bit about what we've covered over the last couple sessions, do a review of resilience hubs, and I'm gonna invite you to sort of broaden your understanding of resilience hubs to include a much bigger idea of a resilience network. And tonight, Susan's going to help us get situated in this idea that it may be bigger than just our corner store or our Little Faith Community House of Worship, or even the big structure that is Sabathani. That actually we're going to be part of a much bigger story of creating resilience in our communities. You're going to do a little bit of a vision of what your what your vision is for this work. Um, and then we're going to hear from Susan, who's going to talk about her work at Collective Resilience. And then at the end, we're actually going to talk about asset mapping. You're going to do another breakout and think about both the art and the science of what it looks like to understand the risks and the assets that we bring to the table. So I was scanning around on the internet trying to find a good picture of a boat on rough waters. And so this is what I have come up with. Here are some folks, maybe they're from the Coast Guard, I don't know. But you can see that the sea is not calm anymore. They might have come out of the harbor on flat water, but now they are rolling and rocking in the seas. And so I want you to at the first session, I invited folks, and if you weren't here, I'll say it again, to imagine that if you're on calm seas and you're in a boat, it's really easy to get from here. Maybe you need to walk across the deck with a cup of water that's full to the top, and you want to walk across without spilling it. Not that hard. You could just, move as fast as you can move, and you get there. If it's rough seas, you never know exactly when the storm is going to tip you one way or another. So you've got to have some handholds. You've got to have some calves that are strong enough to keep you steady. You've got to be able to bend and move and be flexible in the midst of that storm. So I actually am going to ask you all to use the chat here and write in the chat, what are the kinds of rough seas that you're imagining that we have to build the handholds and the good muscles and the relationships and the networks to be able to withstand? So when we think about these rough seas that are ahead, what are the rough seas that come to your mind in your community? So I'm going to just give you about 30 seconds to write those into the chat, and then we'll move forward. Okay, take another few seconds. If you can type it in, I would really appreciate it. Pouring in here. I'm going to just read a few of them. Okay, I am seeing burnout is a part of the rough sea. Food shortages and intermittent energy. Thank you, Mara. Yeah. Maria. Is that how you say your name, Maria? Maria. Increasing extreme heat. That's what we talked about today in Ramsey County. Obviously, climate change is doing a lot of trickery in the way that we are experiencing our world and the weather. We may have weather events, but we may not have the relief services that we need. There could be violence. thinking about challenges of having access to mental health care. Paula talks about the ability to step in and interfere with abductions. So we have all sorts of things happening in our immigrant community, electricity and gas outages, food, um, the incredible challenges of funding cuts for critical programs from emergency services to climate change research to climate solutions. That's a big one. And I think I'll stop there, but keep them coming. If you have more, please put them in because we'll be saving the chat. All right, so here's just a little brief review of what we talked about in the first couple weeks. The first week we had a special guest from the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, and we heard about their model of helping to set up resilience hubs in cities and municipalities. And we heard about how in a resilience hub, we need to be thinking about what's happening at that location, on one block on this planet, Earth, during a normal everyday. Are there programs that are going on? Is there support? Are there cultural things? Um, we need to have a plan for everyday more normal mode. We have to have a plan for what happens during a disruption, and then we also have to make plans about what happens during recovery, who's part of that recovery, etc. So at the end, Buff Grace brought up a beautiful map of Minnesota, and there were 10,000 dots on that map. And we said, you know what, we could have 10,000 resilience hubs throughout the state of Minnesota. We have 10,000 lakes. Why not 10,000 resilience hubs? Because these are places of community. They're places where the community has come together in order to keep themselves safe. They're places that model the kinds of future that we want with healthy food and renewable power and healthcare. And they're also places that we can count on in an emergency. We went on to talk about how in each resilience hub, we need to be thinking about 5 different columns of work that need to go on. There's programs and services, there's a communications plan, there's operations that take place. Who unlocks the door during an emergency? There's a lot of planning and building and thinking about how the natural landscape and the built landscape is going to help our community thrive. And then there's a whole bunch of conversations about how to power that building and especially how to power that building in the midst of an emergency. So this was awesome. We got a great model. We heard from Dr. Estelle Montgomery from Washington, D.C., who has designed an incredible resilience hub that has cost millions of dollars and is such an inspiration. And then we started going down the path. What does it take to get from here to there? And I want to credit Susan and Collective Resilience with this beautiful diagram. This represents the steps that were pointed out in the USDN model. And it says, first, you're going to need to get together and do some research, figure out what's out there, who's out there. You're going to attend some webinars every month. You're going to start figuring out what it looks like to imagine a resilience hub in your place. You're then going to go on and do some team building. And last month we had Reverend Tyler Sitt came and talked about his really inspirational model of planting a church in South Minneapolis and how it was to do one-to-ones and have a ratio of conversion, and talked a lot about, what does it take to really build the kind of team that you want. This week we're going to talk about assessments and how we figure out what's wrong, what do we have that we can bring to those risks and opportunities. And then we're going to go on to be talking about real specific goal setting, implementation, and then of course, how do you continue this hub into the future? And like I said, one of the things that's been really growing on me as I've been working and reading and talking to other resilience practitioners is that really this is more than just the hubs. It's the community that is supporting those hubs. It's the relationships between hubs. today at the extreme heat tabletop exercise, I had an opportunity to be in the same room with two different Lutheran congregations in St. Paul who were both there to learn and think about how they respond to an emergency from people that were from the Red Cross and from FEMA and from Ramsey County, multiple different departments, and from um, the area hospitals. So lots of different folks within this network. And I just want to confess something to you. It is incredibly overwhelming. And I started out this journey. I'm a college professor. I build curricula. I've studied resilience. I've studied the building blocks of social change and how you can create something really powerful in your congregation. And this material has thrown me for it's not for a loop so much as just it's been there's so many micro solutions, and what I'm finding is that sometimes it's hard to find your handhold amidst all of the big charts and the lists of kitchen implements and whatnot. So I was really excited to meet Susan, who's also been thinking about, the sort of the both the hugeness and also the opportunity for this work to meet us exactly where we are. So I did want to show you three really effective websites, which we will put into a follow-up email that you will get. There's a group in Massachusetts. They call themselves Crew. It's part of the Better Future Project, which is focuses a lot on climate justice. And they have just a plethora of resources about how to engage your community in a deep and abiding and nuanced way. You've heard about the USDON model. There's this wonderful framework for the National Association of Climate Resilience Planners, and I'll share a couple of ideas from that book tonight. So here we go. Here's some of the guiding principles, and I want you to think about this as you think about the work that you're doing in your community. When we think about climate resilience planning, whether it's a hub or a neighborhood, really, how do we do whole systems thinking? What does that mean for you in your context? How can we make sure that the desired outcomes are reflected at every step of the process? So, if our goal is to have a community that communicates well with each other and centers kindness and is prepared for a disaster, how can we make sure that when we host our meetings that we're not yelling at each other, instead we're listening and figuring out a process that will put a variety of different people's needs on the table? How can we design a planning process for our resilience hubs that is a learning process so that we're not just coming up with the expert solution and telling people how it's done, a very sort of typical way to do things, but instead be learning as we design our processes. And that involves planning into action. And sometimes there's a wonderful thinker named Paula Freire who talks about the action reflection cycle. So how can we be taking some actions and, sometimes falls flat on its face and we learn about it and then we integrate a better solution into the next time. And lastly, how do we make sure that we balance the power dynamics among stakeholders? And that's something you're going to have to think deeply about. If your community is a congregation located in a neighborhood and some of the people in that neighborhood look a lot like you and others do not, is this a resilience hub that is going to be for everyone? It's okay if the answer is no, but if it is, how do you balance those dynamics? So they've got a great set of steps to success. And I will share with you that I think that we have, already talked about a lot of these. Um, Visioning, building capacity for integrated issue analysis. Um, and then, of course, assessing community vulnerability and assets. And lastly, I want to share this matrix with you for a minute. If you are somebody who has a tiny congregation, or maybe you are a storefront in the middle of a small town in Minnesota, and you have 1,000 square feet, and you have a network of, you know, several hundred people. Um, what does it look like for you to go through these steps? How is that different from a larger neighborhood-wide resilience hub like Sabathani? And how is that different for a city or a county resilience network that is involving many different locations, but a web of connection and power that's going to help us meet our goals? So again, this is not the matrix you have to use, but I'm asking you to think about who are you and how does the co-development look different if you're, just two neighbors getting together to try to figure something out and you're gonna open up your house to other neighbors versus if you have to get permission from the city of Minneapolis for what you do. It's gonna look different, steps 1 through 6. All right, so I'm gonna take a deep breath. And I'm going to welcome Susan. And Susan, I hope you are okay that I pulled this beautiful diagram off of your website because this is really what drew me to the conversation with you. Susan is not only about Resilience Hub, she's about creating communities that care and belong, about place-based resilience, about climate solutions and how that's related, about equity, about disaster preparedness. And I thought to myself, this is what the MNIPL network and the Community Climate Resilience Network is all about. So we've got to hear from Susan. So Susan, I'm going to let you tell your stories about developing community in Northern California.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's really great to be here. Thank you for the invitation to speak. If you could put those slides on again, that would be really great.
Yes, Emily is going to put them in. So feel free to just introduce yourself briefly and she's going to pop those right back up.
Okay, cool. So I do have a confession to make. I have never been to Minnesota. So so I would love if you all could share in the chat one word or one phrase that describes Minnesota. Just like something that just encapsulates Minnesota. That might be hard. I know. Cold. That's one word I was thinking of. Passive aggressive, flakes, adventure. Love it. Love it. Sweet air in the spring. Great. Yeah, I have always wanted to go to Minnesota, and it's great to be here. Earnest people. Wildlands, love it. Thank you so much. So, next slide, please.
Emily, this is you.
I'm just going to say next slide. So I'm not able to,
Emily may be having some slide problems, in which case, there we go.
Oh, okay. All right. So anyway, next note that this slide right here. So again, I live in Berkeley, California, which is Ohlone lands, and these are some pictures that encapsulate me with my daughter. I've always really infused lots of nature and stewardship in our lives, and we spend a lot of time out in nature, and that really is what centers me, is that love for nature and love, and what am I going to leave, how am I going to contribute to leaving this planet a better place for my family, for my children. That's my husband Shay as well. So if you want to put in the chat any word that you think describes California, feel free to do that as well. Next slide. So Collective, I started a consulting firm, but also this nonprofit, which the purpose is to provide guidance for resilient places. So hub spaces and neighborhoods and networks to evolve and flourish. And really looking at sites that are not just like the big giant sites, but just meeting the sites where they're at, with, with this, looking at, maybe you have just a couple things that are you're doing around community resilience. Maybe you have a lot, but really meeting sites where they're at. And we are collecting stories and resources, really want to have lots of resources, open source resources on the website. I'm working on a report around schools, climate resilient schools, and then do a lot of capacity building and education with specific sites, especially those in marginalized communities like East Oakland. Lots of workshops. I was just at Berkeley High School. They were working on how do they develop their high school as a resilience hub. Done a lot of work with libraries, and then networks. It really takes a village to support this work of community resilience. So I've done lots of presentations and work with the city of San Leandro, and really excited to be working with our local utilities. They're going to be providing solar with battery backup for up to 50 sites in this area in the East Bay. So excited to be working on that project. So next slide, please.
Emily, can you get to the next slide?
Next slide, please.
Hmm.
Is Emily?
I wonder if she,
Maybe someone else could drive the slides.
Having technical difficulties. You might have to do it, Julia. Some of my buttons aren't working for some reason.
okay, I'm gonna do that then.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, so here we go. Share. 1 second. Here we go.
Awesome. Okay. There we go. Okay. So yeah, and just the heart of this being that I've really, in addition to nature, just really embodied the spirit of community in my work, starting with the Peace Corps when I lived in the town of 1,000 in Costa Rica, and just really found like so many people were supporting each other. And now in my neighborhood, we do lots and lots of different neighborhood events and disaster preparedness, etc. And excited to be starting work with my synagogue around supporting it as Resilience Hub, just to let you know. So really excited about that process in addition to my work. So curious, we all know this is just such a pivotal moment that we're in, making this work all the more urgent to do. Just three things that come to mind right now, being that our country is so polarized and divided, and how this work can really support centering building relationships and trust, really moving beyond politics so that we're starting with the common ground of working with each other. And then the fact that our social safety nets could be breaking down, if Social Security, if Medicaid, is cut. So really focusing on mutual aid, growing food, support for mental health, the bolstering up those social safety nets in our communities. And then just the fact that we need resilience everywhere as extreme weather is increasing. And again, supporting not just the bigger sites, but the smaller sites, and we call them emerging hubs, and focusing on building those networks of not just the sites, but also the nonprofits and the community-based organizations that is supporting them. And then support for the funding, as well as we have sort of a breakdown in federal funding. We want to turn to the local funding to support, especially the smaller projects. Next slide. So I just want to start with a story of a trip that I took to Asheville, North Carolina in October. I was going to be doing work around getting out the vote, but then pivoted a bit to support all the mutual aid that was out there. And I've heard so many great things about Asheville. I don't know if anybody has been there, but it's a really magical place with lots of arts and a very thriving community and mutual aid scene. And really supported by this group called Beloved Asheville, but also the United Way is very strong. They have a tool lending library. They have lots of sharing happening. So these are photos that were taken before Hurricane Helene. And next slide. After their one of the most intense hurricanes ever to hit this country was there, and they hadn't, of course, as you know, hadn't really been expecting it. It was viewed as more of a climate safe community, so they were prepared, but not as much as they could have been, as you know. Next slide. So I was just really, really just touched by the generosity, by the support, by the so many neighbors, stories of neighbors that were pitching in. It was just an incredibly beautiful experience to be there right after the hurricane. The center of the center of the picture you see, or the center picture you see, they had established these bucket brigades because they didn't have running water, and they literally carried up buckets of water to senior citizens and other folks that could not get water on their own. They had so much mutual aid, like free diapers, free food, so much happening. And it really was because they were immediately able to kick into action because they had both formal and informal mutual aid groups, as you could read from this quote. So they were immediately able to activate, and the churches and the synagogues, the place of worship, really kicked into gear as well. Next slide. So, and what I saw from the Spirit was people were in despair, but when they turned that despair into action, they really needed that. And I don't know if you've seen that before, you know, that people who just sit and, you know, and I do this too, the doom scrolling, but when you're actually working on a community project, a positive project, you're turning that despair into action, and it's really, really good for our mental health. To the right, this is, oh, next. This is me helping out the arts district was just decimated, so we were helping to clear that out. That's me, and then this is the quote of the person on the right. It's good for my community, good for my mental health. Next slide. So this just goes back to this theory of change that we need networks. You know, you can't survive on your own. This is an example of, in theory, I'm not saying it's happening yet, but there's one resilience hub in Oakland, the Lincoln Square Recreational Center, that has $40 million to tear down this facility and then build it up as a resilience hub. And then all the different organizations that are helping to support it, like utilities, philanthropy, the CBOs, the government, etc. And then you also have the other sites that also have other things and in different parts of the city as well. Now, I wish that the city would provide lots of funding for every site, but and we're still trying to have that conversation to make that happen. But the other sites are getting money from other sources, and it is the intention that the city provide more funds for other sites as well. Next. So again, going back to that, you can have resilience hubs of any size. Whatever you do, that's great. Just start somewhere. And the USDN does really work with bigger sites, but we're saying, like, you know what, just we'll meet you where you're at. You know, some programs, some infrastructure, etc. Next slide. And with that, I wanted to share a case study of the city of San Leandro, which is near Oakland, which is, I helped work with them for about a year and a half. And this was government funding that we got to support 10 sites, and there's actually, I think, 13 of them now. And some of them were, there were, I believe, 3 places of worship, and some nonprofits, and then Tags is actually a storefront, which is supported by or run by teens. And so each of these sites really supports something different. So one has, you know, food distribution, another one showcases a tiny home encampment. And so they all are kind of doing something different. We all we had monthly meetings as well as different in-person activities that we did as well. Next slide. So we really got to know each other through these community building exercises and activities, which I really highly recommend as, you're building community as you're building resilience at the same time. To the left, you have we had a sheet mulching project with Temple Beth Shalom. We had about 30 different people that came. It was a beautiful event with government funding. And then this table talk exercise, which if you've been, it's a really great way to just hone in on one disaster. We focused on extreme heat that day, or sorry, an earthquake that day. And then we also did other things like supported a crop swap where people came and shared their backyard produce with each other. I started one in Berkeley where we've met once a week for the past 5 years during the spring and the summer. Next slide. So this is one example of a church that was part of this San Leandro, that is part of the San Leandro network. Just really, I'm sure you're so aware that it's so important to work with partners. This is one, as we say, grass tops organization. That's an organization that doesn't necessarily have a site to work with, but they work with lots of different partners. And so they started a community garden at Bethel Community Church. The Alameda County Food Bank has a food pantry at the church as well. And then this is an architecture firm that is building a tiny home community. So Bethel, when they started, they didn't actually call themselves a resilience hub. But then when I said, you actually are one because you're doing all of this. So that's just one best practice that we have, is like, just honor what you have, and then you really are a resilience hub when you're doing all this work. And they're starting to open up as a cooling center as well. So next slide. So yeah, just Julie wanted to have me share some just best practices in terms of getting started. So forming your core team is really essential. I don't know how many of you have already done that, or on your way, but just asking for permission, meeting with staff and leadership. Consider collaborating with existing committees like the Green Team or the Social Justice, and then consider studying and then working with the sociocracy model. How many of you are familiar with sociocracy? Say thumbs up. Excellent. So it's just more of a decentralized model of governance, where you have different sort of working groups that are supporting specific projects. The board of directors is a little bit more on the side of it, but there are lots of ways, and you could really get grounded in sociocracy and learn more from it. I really recommend that. And then of course, bringing in the potential and current partners and stakeholders. Next slide. And then hopefully you all are well aware of your vulnerabilities and the assets, especially when it comes to extreme weather. In where I live, we're really concerned about droughts. We're really concerned, starting to be more concerned about heat waves, for example. I do recommend doing a site assessment with a permaculture designer that really embeds nature-based solutions, and then using digital tools that are out there. Anybody wants to, that one is from California, but if you want to name any others in the chat, any that you've used to really understand the vulnerabilities in your community when it comes to the climate crisis. And then looking at asset mapping. So this is another case study of this group that I work with called the East Oakland Collective. And we did two things. We looked at a couple of things. We looked at digital surveys to start with, got a bunch of, I think it was 100 people to work on our surveys. And then we did lots of tabling at existing community events, which I really recommend, just like tag teaming on an event that someone is doing already. And then we hosted a couple of meetings with stakeholders, with partners that were specific and had food. I think it's always very important to have food at these events. We did one neighborhood walk where we looked at the assets in the neighborhood. And then we went out when we did mutual aid, we actually went out and just kind of asked some casual questions to them, because those are really the people that we wanted to talk to the most, the folks that we knew that would want to would be using the site as a resilience hub. Next slide. And then looking at the visioning, the community visioning piece, really looking at what do you, okay, you know what you have, what do you want? What are some just big ideas and small ideas? And just going back to that, like doing both. Some of these ideas like solar with battery backup, that might take a long time, you know, to get the funding for it. But some of the smaller things you could do, they might not take any funding, and you could do like next week. So some just best practices, just sharing examples of lots of resilience hubs and the different networks out there. And maybe starting with the scenario, like, listen, there's been a big flood. What are you going to do? You know, what are you visioning that this site could serve to be, the small things and the bigger? Hosting maybe a smaller conversation at an existing event, or something as simple as like putting a prompt on your bullet board and asking a question around like, what do you envision your site to be doing? And then of course there's, you know, community meetings. You can have a movie that just called, there's one called The Response, where it talks about mutual hubs or resilience hubs that were started in Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. I don't know if you're familiar with the World Cafe, which is sort of a way to just organize conversations. But that's another way to do community visioning. Next slide. And then, of course, bringing in those community partners and those collaborators. These are some that we've been working with in the South Bay in Northern California. Making sure you have an MOU when when there's money involved. Next slide. And yeah, just want to end with this quote that I love from Rob Hopkins, who started the Transition Network, which is a network of sites around the world that really focuses on small community projects. So, and this is very pertinent right now. If we wait for the government, it'll be too late, little too late. If we act as individuals, it'll be too little. But if we act as communities, it might just be enough, just in time. So with that, I am going to, if there's any questions. First of all, I know that was a lot of information.
Wow, Susan, thank you so much for sharing not only your personal story, but also the story of, you know, how you were able to utilize that sort of wonky 7-step model that the USDN has given us, and bring it alive in the context of, you know, smaller institutions that you have worked with. I'm wondering if you can just talk just back to North Carolina for a second. You know, this is I mean, we are learning every day. But what were some of what was some of the planning or interconnection that they had done, either intentionally or unintentionally, that made a difference? Like, talk a little bit about what made it possible for them to be in recovery mode. You know, I mean, I'm not going to say with no pain. It was terrible, terrible, terrible disaster, but there were some lights.
I think that, first of all, there's a really strong mutual aid organization called Beloved Asheville that was able to just immediately kick things into gear. And they brought in a lot of donations. They brought in a lot of funding. So there was that. I think the United Way was really able to support with the volunteers that were really wanting to help. I think that it was really just that spirit in the neighborhoods of community. And honestly, I think some of it just wasn't planned. Like in the moment, they were sharing like, oh my gosh, we don't have electricity. What do we do? They came out of their homes and they talked with each other, and they used a site like the church, like a community center, as their communications, and people knew you know, to do that. But like, I think a lot is in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, we have another question from Beth down in Georgia. Um, do you have an example of the digital survey that you used, or just talk a little bit about what that entailed?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I could send to you the digital survey that we use with East Oakland Collective. And part of the vision for Collective Resilience is sharing these tools as open source tools so anybody could use them. So I'm going to be putting them up on the website. So like an example of a community visioning session, the digital survey, etc. And there's different digital surveys, you know, like one for neighborhoods, and then there's one for um, a community center. So there, one for, I don't have one yet for a place of worship, but I think maybe that's something that we can work on together, just like modify it a little bit so that it fits more to a place of worship.
That's
Beautiful.
awesome. Thank you. I used something from Oakland, actually, Roots to Resilience, in doing a community survey. So I don't know if it's based on that, but I'm looking forward to seeing it.
You used it from Rooted in Resilience?
Yes. Mhm.
Oh yeah, yeah. They folded, I think 4 or 5 years ago, but they still have their tools up. Yeah, so that's a good one as well.
Really beautiful tools. Okay, I'm going to move us into a breakout session for all of us out there. I'm hoping, Susan, that you'll stay with us and participate. And then I've got a few more examples and things to share, some tools, and then we will close at 8 o'clock. So let me get the slides back up again. Uh-oh. Okay. So here's what I want to do. We're gonna break up into groups of 3 or 4 people. And I would love you to go around the circle and just talk about what kind of group are you building? Um, what are the harms and risks that you're hoping to address as you think about this? So, you know, if you're really worried about extreme weather or whatever, talk about the risks that you're imagining. And then what are the sort of assets that you bring to the bigger network? We're going to be working a lot on this idea of, you know, bringing the resources from the counties and the emergency folks and the health providers, et cetera. But right now, I want to know, what assets do you from your community bring? I will put these questions in your in the chat for you after I make the rooms. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can create the rooms. I will bring folks back in 8 minutes. Folks, I'm gonna bring us back in about a minute. Hello, hello.
Hello.
I love that moment when everybody whooshes back in. All right, all right, all right. Well, I would love to, I'd love to hear a little bit from you all about your discernment about what kind of a resilience hub you were, the risks you're thinking of addressing, and your assets. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Um, if it's all right, I'm gonna just sort of go around go through the different groups. And in the first group was Chad and Kelly and Maisie and Susan. Is there somebody in that group who wants to share a bit about your conversation? Maybe Chad or Kelly or Maisie.
Yeah, we were just talking about just the different situations we were in. Angie and this is Angie right here. We're at Central Lutheran in downtown Minneapolis, and we're trying to figure out how to activate it in a way that can handle kind of bigger situations. Right now we kind of consider ourselves a little bit of a resilience hub because we're there for the community through foods insecurities, um, nurse needs, food, clothes closets, that sort of thing. So on a daily basis, we are kind of doing that. But I know some other people had some other just a wide variety of scenarios that can happen. Was kind of what we were talking about.
Totally. And were there some assets that you identified? You already talked about the things that you do, the food services and stuff like that. What any assets that emerged sort of in terms of your ability to step up and do some different work?
Do you have?
Not exactly, just things we can explore.
Yeah, yeah. Susan suggested us doing a survey just to see what the community might be with next steps and how to provide better assets to the community.
Awesome. All
And
right.
they asked an interesting question. How do you really motivate groups to, step up? And I said, money is a good motivator if there's grant funding.
Mhm.
And then an emergency that happens, people will really get motivated to do something.
Yeah.
Totally. One thing I just mention one motivator that I have found, especially in formalized faith communities like Central Lutheran, is that sometimes you have to be really thoughtful about how permission happens in the context of an institution like that. So, if you have a, religious leadership or a faith team that is really excited about it, it can put wind in the sails of a volunteer-led group. If the, folks in the leadership of that institution are sort of not really committed, it can be a barrier. And so one of the things I really encourage people to do is as they build their core team, figure out what has permission work in the place that you are.
Yeah.
All right, is there somebody from group 2, Anne or Beth or Richard or Susan, who want to step up and share?
If Richard doesn't mind if I put him on the spot, they're just doing so many awesome things already that build cohesion. So I don't know, he might want to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm with Hennepin Avenue Methodist, and we already have we're part of a group of churches that provides community meals on Sunday evenings when the Salvation Army is closed, and we have our Dignity Center, which works on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays with people with homeless or people that are out of work, and then we've identified one particular issue is that many of us drive some miles to come to church. We realize that the need to have better connections with the neighborhood that we sit in could greatly benefit the community and benefit us. And so I think that we're trying to tag team on events so that we can get better understanding of where we are located and how we can be of benefit to people, how we can make our facility more comfortable and inviting for people to come join us, and whether it's to seek safety or to just commune with people. Anyway, we have some distance to go yet on developing any backup power situations or more environmentally friendly stuff, but we're working on it.
I can't wait to get you guys into a tabletop exercise with folks from the county. It will be fantastic. All right, Maria or Tom? I'm looking for.
Well, I learned a new word, and it's from Maria, degrowth.
Mm,
The Sierra Club is working on.
fantastic. How about Tom? What brings you into this space, and what kind of a resilience hub are you imagining?
Well, I'm also with Hennepin Methodist Church.
Got it. Perfect. So you've got more than one person in that team. That's amazing.
And something that I learned early on about resilience hubs is that the first thing is not coming up with solutions. It's getting to know your community and what the perceived needs are and where you might fit in. So I think we really are starting from that point, and we aren't jumping too quickly to these other things. An example, our senior minister talked to the executive director of the Loring Park Neighborhood Association last year and said, basically, what can we do? And she said, well, you've got a big parking lot. How about having a big party for the neighborhood? And so we did that twice last summer, and it was fairly successful. And so we're doing it again twice this summer, where you just have tables and let people from different community organizations talk about what they do, people who sell stuff, food, little games and stuff. It's humble, but it's the real stuff, getting people together.
That's so beautiful. And I think when you start to ask yourself the question, what are the risks? What are the disasters that we're really preparing for? Sometimes you don't even really know what it is that people are needing until you create those spaces where they can come and be in conversation with you. So maybe this year there could be a booth where you could be starting to ask people, what are you imagining, on the risk side, what are you imagining the assets that this community can bring together? Lynn, you and Nikolai were in a group. And Brett, I don't know if you were there or not. I was unclear about that.
Yeah, I don't know. Brett wasn't with us. Do you want to go ahead, Nikolai, or?
Sure. So we talked a bit about both Lynn and I's association with government. So Lynn is a commissioner with the city of Coon Rapids, and I'm with St. Paul Ramsey County Public Health on the climate and health team. And as far as things like assets, we didn't necessarily talk about this, but I think we both want to be assets for communities that are in community groups that are interested in advancing resilience hubs for whatever that means for them. Lynn talked about some of the city of Coon Rapids work on sustainability and like pollinator gardens and interests and ambitions in bringing in like resilience into that area of work. And then St. Paul Ramsey County is really trying to connect with community groups that are interested in this and figure out what connections can be made. And yeah, Lynn, you also talked about some of your work with ecotherapy and community organizing, which I think is a really awesome resource. And yeah, I guess I would also just throw in there like holding a lot of like relationships and connections um, with people and staff members in public health, other community organizations that yeah, can
Yeah,
hopefully
yeah.
we can all advance this together uh, and just yeah be a big giant ecosystem of resilience
Yeah.
for each other. Yeah, Lynn, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is good job, because I wasn't remembering all of that, all the details of that talk. But we were pretty wide ranging, and one of the things that came out of that was the idea that part of resiliency is being able to acknowledge that you have these overwhelming feelings when something happens, or fear for a lot of people right now about what is about to happen or what they fear is going to happen, and how being prepared, having a few things in place, even just something, like basic information about go bags and stuff in case there was a climate emergency of some sort that you had to respond to, that acknowledging all of those things beforehand helps people process the actual event better because they're not so overwhelmed right away with the shock of it all. They can begin to tick in, oh yeah, now I remember, now we have to do this and we have to do this. And that really frees up a lot of energy for dealing with whatever it is that we're needing to deal with.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to call on one last group, Paula and Lance and Joshua. One of you want to share a bit? Paula, what did you take home from that conversation?
Well, Lance, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right.
It's Lance, but that's okay.
Lance, shared about being a meteorologist who has done storm preparedness education and research, and recently moved to Minneapolis and is poised and ready to figure out where to jump in and help contribute those kinds of things. Yeah, Joshua, you should speak for yourself. I shared a little bit about Joshua's got his hands in a whole bunch of great community organizing things. I have been working for a while with the East Phillips Neighborhood Institute, which is converting a huge warehouse building in South Minneapolis into an indoor urban farm and building tons of relationships. And I think they bring a diversity of support, diversity of ethnicities and experiences to that. And also a lot of challenges with poverty and extreme need. A lot of recent immigrants and refugees who I imagine are shaking in their boots right now, but still lots of great allies and possibilities. So, beautiful. Joshua, do you want to hear anything? Yeah.
I think you did a wonderful job, Paula. I'm really impressed by the work and the passion that both you and Lance described, and I think ultimately the summation of what we discussed, what we're bringing is we're carrying on the traditions of what got us here and building community, and the risks we're looking to remediate are on the metaphysical side, the internalized trauma and bias of the systems that we live in that impact us and the vulnerable communities around us. And then the physical side, right, we got to remediate the soil. We have to build the infrastructure and the mutual aid infrastructure to ensure that we are able to safeguard and protect what we love and value the most. And I feel that we have a lot of potential brewing in our communities, and our second, Epney is doing amazing work, and there's a lot of great work happening in Bryant neighborhood and Elliott Park neighborhood, and yeah, we had a great conversation. So I'll leave it at that. But thank you, Paula, and thank you too, Lance.
You're welcome. I just add on to that Chad, I'm also a member of Central Lutheran. I joined it back in May and joined the C3 team, basically the green team. My experience, my background is, Paula said, is professionally with the National Weather Service and NOAA, and building resilience in the communities and figuring out how that works. It's more at a higher level, but I would love to dig deeper into the personal level, into the disadvantaged communities and how they do things. Like colleagues and I started a program called Storm Ready. You can Google that. It has gone on to about 3,000 communities across the United States. It's all built on the community being better prepared to handle crises, and especially weather and climate types of crises. And now that I'm retired, I would like to dig deeper in figuring out how to help the local communities through our churches, through this Resilience Hub context. So just let me know.
Man, I am going to take you up on that beautiful offer. Thank you. I am going to move us back to the slides so we can get through a little bit more content before we leave at 8. But thank you for bringing your stories and for investing in those conversations. I am struck by the wealth of different perspectives, but also the common story that you have, which is that you're looking for the networks and the relationships to make this whole. So back to sharing my slides. All right. So I want to just reiterate that there are hundreds of great places to go online in which you can start to learn about the relative risk. This comes from that CREW website from Boston, the Better Futures Project. But they have basically collected a bunch of models where you can put your city in and figure out what is the sort of the average heat going to be in the future. This is something that is not very alarming. It doesn't tell you what the storm looks like, but it does start to get people thinking about how things are changing. There are a variety of different checklists, which I'm going to include in the memo to you, the email that you'll get in the next couple days. So you can link around. I've been doing a review of a number of different checklists. And you can start to ask yourself, if you live in a county, what does it look like? What is the food supply? Is there energy independence? What are the healthcare systems looking like? What kind of business plan and planning and preparation is there? There are a dozen different checklists that are community-wide checklists. So these are not asset maps for your congregation per se. It's an asset map for the community to look at. But I actually find it pretty useful to think about if you were in a core team at Central Lutheran or Hennepin, or in a congregation, a tiny congregation in a small town, to be able to go through the list of categories and say, what do we know about the food supply in our area? We may not be able to take that on right now, but if there was an emergency, would we know where to send people? So I really encourage you to download some of these lists, to look at them with your team and think about, without maybe spending too much time doing every checklist yourself, what kind of categories will help you to think about the kinds of risks that you might encounter, and the way, if you can choose 2 things that your community could dive into and really excel at, what would they be? This comes from that organization that Susan was saying has shut down, but they've got a ton of great resources called Bay Localize. And they, give you the spreadsheet to fill out here. What impacts are most likely to be felt? Is it a tornado, or is it severe weather, or is it heat? And who is most at risk in your community? And what actions could be taken by your community to reduce these risks? Who would be responsible? Is it going to be, Hennepin United Methodist that's actually going to provide the water for people if there's no clean drinking water? Or is it that you're going to hook up with the Red Cross who's going to be able to do that? So starting to think about what's your role and what's other folks' roles is going to be a critical piece of doing that risk and assets assessment. And I love this last one, which is, what kind of jobs will this create? If we really were able to do this well, are there some ways that we can think about what our future might look like and create positions that will be ready to respond in these ways, but also be working in the between times? There's some great digital mapping materials. This is not for everyone, but you can map out where in your community things are located. You can do this on a big piece of white paper. You can do this on a computer using GIS. This was just one of many, but one that I thought was exciting. Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots digital mapping curriculum. So she sort of leads you through what do you download, how do you do that, and helps you think through, how you could, for example, make this a project that the youth group would do or a small team would do, thinking through all those different resources. I just wanted to remind you that assets include everything from the people that you know. Maybe you have folks in your congregation that are meteorologists and have an experience creating storm curriculums, right? You all are really lucky to have lawns. But maybe you also have a lot of doctors. You may want to be thinking about what the role your congregation can play in the bigger network by listing and getting people excited just to sign up, say, this is what I can add. Maybe there's a post-it that you put on the wall and people can put their skill up. Do you have some groups that are already existing that maybe could take on one piece of this? Think about the power of the existing social structures that exist, that are in place in your organization. And again, this is institutions in a neighborhood or in a city, but what other institutions are out there that you could be partnering with? Maybe it's all the Episcopal churches are going to link up and have a role that they can play, that they become known for. Or maybe it's more about figuring out within the Loring Park neighborhood, where are there schools and social service agencies. And of course, the physical resources are also important. Do you have places where people can go in an extreme heat event, for example? So Joshua was there, Nikolai was there, but today was the first of, I think, probably a number of tabletop exercises that happen specifically related to these resilience challenging events. And so today we met, I just wanted to show a picture of the folks at my table. The woman on the left, Allison, she was from Ramsey County Communications. Next to her is somebody who's part of, he's a meteorologist, works for the National Weather Service, somebody from the National Guard, somebody from St. Paul Parks, and somebody from both Ramsey County and Department of Homeland Security. And then next to him was somebody who is coming from the hospital system. So what an incredible brain trust that I had the opportunity to sit with. And what we did is we mapped it out. What would it really look like if in July of 2025, there was a 5-day heat event? What would we do in the days ahead of, maybe we have a forecast, but it's still not hot? What would we do in the sort of the beginning of that emergency when maybe we're not calling it an emergency because we still have power And then what would we do if all of a sudden there are 125,000 people without power and without air conditioning with 117-degree heat index? You know, how would we operate together? I am excited about getting people within the Climate Community Resilience Network that we're putting together here to start participating in these exercises, to bring people from congregations in and say, hey, here's what we can provide. But one of the things that I learned was that while it's super exciting to be there and thinking together, what can we all do? We really need to make sure that we have a set of shared goals, that we have communications that have been established in a way in which there's both internal core teams and external communication patterns that have been mapped out. That we've mapped out these trusted networks and answered some questions about who do we call in that emergency. And in order to do that, we're going to need to have some clear definitions and roles. So I guess my invitation to all of you is to, be part of trying to figure out what do these networks look like and what is your role in that? And how can we really make it a thing that congregations and small our resilience hubs can be a part of the essential fabric or ecosystem of these, really cool teams that are being established to deal with some of these emergencies. So it's 7:57. We've had lots of great conversation. If there's, maybe one question left, we can do that. And then I'll send you off with a short assignment. I think maybe I'm gonna put this.
Say one quick thing.
Yes, please.
I don't know if Susan had something to say. I saw her hand was up. But I would say one of the most encouraging things from that tabletop exercise was the amount of support that was coming from the public entities, from the county level positions, from their comms, from their emergency preparedness, their public health, and coming out of their mouths saying how much they want to make sure that the resilience hubs that we're creating have what our communities need and the value that they saw in what we're doing and what each and every one of you all are doing as well. And I think it was very powerful, and it really shows me, okay, while you might feel like I don't know how we're getting this started, I don't know what we have, what our next step is, or some of you are already well on your way. I want you to know you're not alone, that there is support here for you. And the amount of expertise and wisdom that was in that room, and it was an 8-hour meeting and it was packed, was very powerful. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you so much, Joshua. And I'll invite you all Tuesday, April 15th, 6:30 p.m. We'll have our next session. And in the meantime, what kind of resilience hub or network is right for you? Ask that question around your place of worship or your community. Who is in your core group? Go and have those one-to-ones that Tyler talked about last week. What is the bigger community that you serve? I love that story of opening up the parking lot and having an event and using that as a place where you can really get to the bottom of some of those questions. And what are the risks and the assets that you'll be addressing? So dive in. Remember, it's an iterative process, and enjoy the questions, because the way that we answer the questions is the way that we're going to be present for each other during the emergency. So we'll see you next month.